come back to it in
the future. Yeah.
a couple months. Yeah. Rock on.
It's probably one of my favorite countdown timers that I bought this last year.
Yeah, it's nice.
I use it for youth group. I started doing these for youth group, and the kids are like, "Is there music playing? That's a countdown?" I was like, "Yeah, man." I said, "One, it's for you, but really, it's for me." I need to get longer ones though, because I need more like a 20-minute countdown. Because it takes me about 5 minutes to get this countdown set up.
I would have like countdowns on our worship for a while.
Yeah.
And it was just built into our worship PowerPoint. It's the first slide there.
Mm-hmm.
And my AV guy was like, "Hey, can we do something besides these countdowns? Because it makes the file so big that it takes it forever to load on our computer." It's like, oh, okay. I mean, they were big files. They were.
So what you do is then you host them all on that computer, and when you upload your PowerPoint, you insert them in appropriately.
Yeah. You can do that. Or I think our biggest issue with our AV team is there's so many guys, and they don't have a good training process for them. And
Said every church AV
right.
team.
And so, dropping something new in their laps is both not feasible, nor is it like fair. Because they haven't really been given the tools to.
Yeah.
What I do appreciate about my AV guy is he has a troubleshooting guide that he has printed, and he's got pictures. If there's a problem, there is a table of contents. Here, what's the problem? Go to this page. Here's the steps that you need to do to resolve it in this order. With like pictures and screenshots and everything. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay.
It's pretty fantastic.
I see you.
That's cool. I think he updates it about every other week. Every time there's a new problem, something comes up, he's like, make a note on it. I'll update it and reprint it. So he does a good job.
What I think is cool. Oh, is that we at Pine Tree, like we have a tech company that kind of helps us, and one of our members works at that tech company. But Larry Robbins, man, if he's watching the podcast, shout out to you, man. I used to be the go-to problem solver, but now that Larry has stepped up into this role, he now is the problem solver, and together, because I have been very quick over the years to be able to like problem solve church problems, like church tech problems. We both come back, and he's like a professional IT tech guy, We both come at it from a different perspective, and like there's sometimes where I'm like, hey, let's just do this, and he's like, oh yeah, and then he'll do it, or I'll be like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. I don't even know how to do that. So it's been good at Pine Tree, and it's been good for me because I'm not necessarily having to be like the problem solver. Like there was one day we walked into church, dude, and Windows updated, and it deleted PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, everything that we have to run everything, because we still use PowerPoint. I wish we didn't. I wish we used like ProPresenter or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe in the future. But we so we're like, dude, how are we gonna run the slideshow? And they're like, well, the file's like corrupted. It's not looking like the actual icon. And I'm like, no, it's because there's no program to run it. Like there's no PowerPoint on the computer. It has nothing to do with your file. Well, there's no program to run it. So we ended up having to like unplug and plug into my laptop, and we ran the entire service off of my laptop, which was kind of crazy. But also super cool that we could run the entire service off my laptop if I needed to in that room.
Yeah, that's nice.
So good to know. Good to know. Just like plug and play, baby.
If all the equipment's right, you can do that. Oh man, I had a good draft topic. That's okay. I'll save it for next week.
Next week. Yeah, I was running a little late this morning.
Yeah, are you seriously? I know.
I
Thought maybe we were gonna have to cancel or push, but
never.
Never. There it is.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Behind the Beards. And here on Behind the Beards, we pull the curtain back, take a look behind the scenes, and try to reveal the things that you need to know and go on in the hearts and minds of your ministers and ministry leaders. Aaron Partlow, a youth minister in Longview, Texas, and I'm Joshua Fowler, preaching minister in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And what's going on, man?
Not much. Sorry, I had to switch the camera. I have to switch you right here because my camera is right here, and I have noticed, I've gone back and watched episodes that if you're over here, I spend the whole time like this on the podcast, but if I put you here, then I spend more time like this.
Hey, speaking of which, if you're looking for back episodes, you can find them on the YouTube page. All the videos are stored there.
That's right, they are.
Archived on Facebook, and we're in all the major podcast places. So
That's
Spotify.
Right. I helped a couple
Google
kids find us on Spotify last night. They were like, "You have a podcast, Aaron?" And I said, "I do. I don't know how you didn't know that. We talk about it all the time." But yeah, we do. We're on Spotify. We're on the podcast app on iPhone. We are on just about any podcast app you can kind of find and think about it. You can find us there. You can like, subscribe. You can also rate. Rating us on Spotify and the podcast app does wonders for us. I mean, if you just look at our view count right now, it is through the roof.
No, it is kind of interesting, that we kind of look at this, and this is just our recording.
This is just our recording
avenue here. And so sometimes I look at them like, oh man, but then I go back and look at the views later, and we do have quite a few to pick up after the fact, either on Facebook or on YouTube or in the podcast store. So
we just use this as an opportunity to record and stream in case anyone wants to come in and shout out live or do something like that. But
you never know what's going to get on live, right?
Never know. Anything
new in your world in Longview this week?
That's what's new. Like I feel like I go weeks without seeing my teenagers because of our holiday schedule at Pine Tree, with not having Wednesday night class and only having worship because Christmas and New Year's was both on a Sunday, so we canceled Bible class. And then first of the year, we jet off and go to the National Conference of Children's and Youth Ministry. And then I get right back from that, send out a couple emails, hop on a bus, drive into Dallas for Winterfest, and then we come back. So it's like nothing, and then it's like boom, boom, 2 huge trips. And if you don't know, Lauren and I drove Lauren and Sam up to Topeka, Kansas from Gladewater, Texas. It's about an 8-hour drive. We do it in about 9.5 on a good drive. Not on the way home, we didn't. we took some detours on the way home, but on the way up, and I dropped them off there. We spent a couple days with Lauren's parents, and then I flew out of Kansas City. I tell you all this because I got the perfect preacher story from this trip. Right, so at the end of NCYM, I'm flying back to Kansas City, and so I land in Denver. I took a little pond hopper, is what my aunt would call it, into Denver. So I get to Denver, and I have like 35 minutes. It's only me. No need to stress. No need to sprint. No need to run. I go to the food court because I've been to Denver so many times, right? And I find the Qdoba. I was like, oh, the line's a little long, but we got time. Right? Hey, listen. So anyway, long story short, I get my Qdoba. I get down to the gate, right? I sit down. I double check. I'm like, I've got time. I asked the person next to me, I said, what boarding are they on? They're like 2. And I was like, I'm 4. I got 2 boardings. I can eat this burrito. I start chowing into my burrito. I get a text on my phone that says, hey, we're about ready to start promotion of channel. No, we're about ready to start boarding we're going to finish boarding for your flight to Kansas City. At that point, I looked up at the gate and I realized that I had been sitting at the gate that flies to Dallas. Like, I'm not flying to Dallas, man. I'm flying to Kansas City because that's where my family is, and I'm going to drive them home. So I run up to the gate agent. I throw my burrito, first off, into the bag, and I throw the bag into my backpack because I was like, this is a good burrito. Like, I'm not going to just, like, throw this away. Yeah, priorities, right. People. Priorities. And I go up to the gate agent and said, hey, I need to know where this flight is because I've been sitting at the wrong gate. And he said, okay, it's at B, 7 or something like that. Like, it was, like, single digits. And I'm at, like, B57. And I said, would you please call them and tell them that a fat man is about ready to book it to that gate? And he laughs, and I said, no, for real, I'm out. And I just, like, turned, and I started booking it, and I ran until my legs were shaking. It was a pretty far run for a big boy like myself. And I get there, and I'm, like, heavy breathing, and the guy's like, are you okay? What's going on? And I said, I just ran. Oh, you're my runner. And I said, yeah. He's like, well, we're not closing the door for, like, another 10 minutes. Like, you're fine. He's like, catch your breath. Tell me what's going on. And they all laugh. I tell them my story and everything. And I go and I sit on the plane, and I have to take my hoodie off and everything because I'm, like, sweating. And I feel like that really gross person who sits on a plane nobody wants to talk to because I'm, like, red-faced, sweating. Like, sir, are you having a panic attack on the plane? I don't know. It was brutal.
That's fun. Yeah. And just everything. And then you feel like a moron because you've been sitting at, you're there, got everything done right. And then
chilling. Right. The vibe was strong. I was chilling. And then I realized, oh, I'm flying to Kansas City, which is so weird to me that, it was crazy. Like, I looked up Dallas on the board. And there was a plane leaving to Dallas the same time we're supposed to leave into Kansas City. Yeah. Like that, isn't that crazy?
Your mind just gets there. Mm-hmm. You kind of get into these little habits, little rhythms.
And speaking of rhythms, today at the show, we're going to talk about kind of this idea of, how do we start something new at our church? How do we start a new program? How do we reevaluate? How do we look at some of our ministries and say, hey, maybe we need to move on, or maybe we need to do something different, or maybe we just, need to start something new this morning.
Yeah, and I like this question because I think a lot of times when, particularly in ministry, when you're looking at other people that have successfully done some things that you want to do, and you ask questions, all you get is like the end goal. Mm-hmm. Like, well, this is what you want, and this is what you need. And like, yeah, but how do you get there? Because you didn't get there overnight, and at some point, we started from nothing, and so all you get is just these kind of blueprints of how a already established, successful and growing ministry should function. Yeah, which doesn't really help me when I'm in the very beginning stages. Mm-hmm. of life of a ministry. I'm looking I look at our churches. Our ladies do a great job of coming together and doing things together.
Sure, yeah.
They've got ladies classes that meet. Our ladies do like tea. They have ladies night out. The ladies from all the churches in this area, they all have like a ladies day, and they invite each other, and they go all over the place. And like for guys, it's like prayer breakfast and a work day once a quarter, and we kind of got to put those two in because we really just need the work day, but that doesn't feel right. So we kind of throw prayer breakfast in front. And
right, yeah.
It's hard to get something like that really going. But when I see other people that have it, I'm like, and this is really rewarding to come and be a part of. Mm-hmm. But trying to figure out how the bones are of getting that started is really, really challenging. And so that's kind of why I really wanted to look at that today, because it's important to look at those first steps. And I know you were just at NCYM. NCCYM. And got some pretty good resources there. So I wanted to take a moment today and kind of dig into those because we need to know.
First off, if you are at a church with a children's minister or a youth minister and they are not going to the National Conference of Children's and Youth Ministry, they are doing something wrong. and your church is doing a disservice to itself by not sending them. It is the best conference, in my opinion, for any Church of Christ, or if you're in a denomination, it's open to others. But it is the best conference for you to be able to go. They have some excellent tracks, but really it's the community that's there, like the community that's there for you to be able to meet and greet other children's and youth ministers, to sit in a room and to say, hey, like, you know what I know, you felt what I have felt, and all this kind of stuff. So it was really, really good this year. I enjoyed a lot of the classes. A lot of the things that like I went to had to do with leadership. I went to one of my favorite classes of the week was leading students who lead students, right? Because for sure. Talk about like wanting to start new programs here at Pine Tree. I feel like I have been trying to get like the baseline, and I feel like once I've gotten the baseline where I've wanted it, that's when I'll start adding some extra oomph and stuff like that. So, student leadership programs are always amazing. And Josh Jones, which we've had him on the podcast before, taught this class, did an amazing job. I had some super great ideas and some really great basic ideas of say, hey, this is a good starting place. You want to start this program, but you don't know what to actually do with your student leaders? Great. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can bring them in and do that. And so, I took that and I took some notes and I brought that home. And what was really great was that paired really well with not only with like student leaders or students who are leading students, but it paired really well with this volunteer class I went to. Like, how do you search? How do you find? How do you get volunteers? But then what do you do with your volunteers? Kind of a thing. And so many great resources and stuff like that to be able to bring home and bring back. And I can dive into those a little bit more if we want to, or we can kind of move on. But it's I would say the biggest part about NCYM that's most important for people is it is a like fire hydrant of information that comes flowing at you, right?
Yeah, right.
Like you could go to NCYM and come home and be like, I am a terrible minister. Like, look at all these amazing things that I don't even implicate in my youth ministry. And that would be the biggest lie that you get. That's like, I would say that's the biggest rookie mistake. When I was young in youth ministry, I remember going to conferences and be like, oh man, I got to come home and completely change my ministry. And I think that's a mistake, because what you're doing is working a little bit, and you need to come in, you need to digest, you need to pray about it, you need to translate it. I think that's the most important thing you do, is because not every program is going to go A to A for you, and so you've got to translate it into your scenario. And so I think that's really important for us to do. And it's good to come back with a fire. But like anybody knows, like if you want a good s'more, what do you got to have? You got to have good coals. You got to have good embers, right? It's not about that giant flame that's coming out of the top of your fire. It's about those coals and those embers at the bottom. So sometimes you got to let that flame cook a little bit. Josh has lost me. He wants me just to leave. That's true, dude. If you want the good s'more, if you want to brown your marshmallow, you don't just stick it in the fire because it'll get toasted. You gotta find those coals and you gotta like cook it over the coals. Apparently, Josh doesn't know how to make s'mores.
That's just I'm speechless. That's funny. I had never heard. I've heard that about fire, because you do need good coals for a fire, but I don't think I've ever even considered making s'mores that way.
Well,
I just use the tip of the flame, and
it doesn't cook thoroughly, doesn't cook right. If you want the perfect marshmallow, you cook it over the hot coals. You don't cook it in the flame. That's a Mama Partlow trick.
A Mama Partlow. All right. Hey, you learn something.
And she used to tell us all the time. We'd start a fire and she'd be like, we want to cook marshmallows. She's like, you got to wait.
I was today years old when I realized the key to perfect s'mores is the coals, not the flame. So that's okay. Right. Never too old to learn, right?
That's hilarious. That moment right there.
Right.
We got to clip that and put that on Instagram or something.
I think it's good to look at like what are some of just the basic ingredients that you need if you're going to start something
chocolate, marshmallow,
not a s'more.
Sorry, we're moving on.
You're a minister, you're a ministry leader, you've been put in charge of the youth ministry, nothing's going on. Where do I start? And you've got some of those resources. One of the things that I really wrestle with is clearly communicating expectations.
Yes.
And the reason I think I struggle with clearly communicating those expectations is because I haven't really defined them for myself.
Yeah.
And for me, there's a couple of things that keep me from doing that. Number one, I don't want to set expectations because I don't want to be disappointed.
That's right. That's a huge one. People don't talk about that very often.
Yeah. And the second thing is I don't want to go getting my hopes up here if nobody's really going to buy in. So I don't want to go doing the work of getting all this set up just for you all to say, nah, I'm kind of out. So I've got to get everything really formulated and decide who is this new ministry targeting? What are the goals that we're going to accomplish? And what are going to be the demands of the people that come in? If I'm thinking about a men's ministry, if I just throw this out there, hey guys, who's interested in starting a men's ministry? How many guys are going to say, yeah, man, me? Not very many, because I don't really know what you're asking. I kind of really want to know, all right, what's the real question? Because if I raise my hand and say, yes, I'm interested, you're going to say, hey, now you volunteered for something.
Right.
So I want to clearly communicate, hey, guys, I want to get some guys together. We want to meet once a month, and we just want to meet for like 3 hours on a Saturday morning. We're not going to take a lot of your time. You're still going to be able to do all the things you need to do. You're still going to be able to go watch football. You're still going to be able to take care of your yard work that you got to get caught up on. You're still going to be able to go do all this stuff.
I don't know about that. I got a lot of yard work.
we just want a couple of hours a month to get together. This is what you can expect. This is what's going to be required of you. And then along the way, we're going to have some other activities that you may choose or not choose to participate in. And once you have a clear vision and expectation set, you're a lot more likely to get some people to really come in and say, yeah, okay, I can do that. But we kind of want to throw something really vague out there, and nobody wants to commit to anything vague. And then we kind of get discouraged. And so then we don't go any further because we don't feel like anybody's interested. So, first things first, set up a series of expectations for yourself and for other people. Hey, and don't be concerned about being disappointed. Don't be concerned about being let down. You have an idea, put it out there, and if it catches on, roll with it. But being clear in that communication.
And it's like important. Like for me, like there's a lot of excitement that I'll do. Like I will bring a new program. Like say, creating a youth committee or something like that, and bring that in. Like you can get really excited, and I know how that first meeting is going to happen and go down. I have no idea what's going to happen afterwards, kind of a thing, right? Or what are you going to do with them afterwards, kind of a thing. And so I think what I want to take a little bit to talk about is like, how do you translate it into your culture or into your church? Like Joshua, if you go to a beard hair in your mouth, if you go to Pepperdine Lectures or you go to Kerygma at OC, or you go to AC Lectures, ACU Lectures, or what's the one at Harding? Do you know? Do you remember? I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. I've been.
I don't know. The conference at Harding.
Yeah, right.
And you go and there's a class and it hits you and you say, I want to bring this back to Goodwood. What does your process look like for you personally? And this is putting you on the spot. I apologize. But what is your process of taking a program or something you want to implement at Goodwood? How do you take that and translate that or implant that or transplant that? Or what does it look like for you mentally before you actually set up a meeting, before you actually bring people in? What do you do to walk through, like, will this work in my setting?
One of the first things that I have to gauge is this something that's just a temporary new shiny thing for myself? That's just kind of captured my attention. I think about kids on Christmas morning, right? All these things they've wanted. They finally get the toy they want. They play for it for 10 minutes. It goes to the side, and then we go to the candy that's in the stockings. And that $200 toy is sitting in the living room floor. And it's not that it's not ever come back to, but it's now it's secondary. I think sometimes new things can be that way for us in church work because we're always attracted to something that's different, especially if it's different and it's working well in another place. So one of the things I do is I like to come home. I like to kind of put this idea before a couple of the people that I kind of trust that also have kind of engaged. Yeah. And just say, what do you think? And then just leave it. Because what I've found is myself, if it's something that God has really put on my heart that needs to transpire in our place or needs to in some way be implemented, I'm not going to be able to let that go. But if 6 weeks later, my friend comes back and says, hey, I've been thinking about that. I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you sooner. And it hasn't even crossed my mind again since. That's probably something that was just a nice little shiny thing that captured my attention in the moment.
Yeah.
But if I have this kind of burning desire in me that's like, hey, have you thought about it? What do you think? What do you think? We need to talk. Let's go. And it's just this constant presence on my mind and heart. That kind of helps me learn to engage those first steps of what may be needed or necessary to kind of move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I do. My very first process is to pray about it. So more spiritual than Josh. Point. No, just playing. My first point process for it is I'll write it down, and then I'll start to think about. I always think about the 20-80, right? 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. So I try to think about like if I'm excited about this and I want to start this or I want to start doing this, who can I involve to kind of help go through it? And then I think about that and I pray over that. Like I really pray for that. And I spend some good times praying over that. And then I'll actually take it to the rest of the ministry staff. I usually take it to our preaching minister, Jody, and I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And he may say, hey, that's good. Or he might say, that's cool, but that's a lot of work on you. Do you have extra time to be able to do all that? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Or, no, I can do that. I'm still young. Kind of an instance. But then, I'll start to think about who could fill these cornerstone gaps that are going to make this ministry, who would be most excited about that? And then, before I announce or even talk to, the church or the youth group or announce it, I go and I talk to those individual people and I say, would you be willing, is this something that you would be interested in? Let me show you my notes. And I'll let them take it home and chew on it for a little bit. And it may come back and we may say, if there's hesitation, then it goes on the shelf for right now. That's the big one for me. If there's some hesitation, then it goes on the shelf for me right now. Kind of an idea.
And I think the shelf is an important place.
Yeah.
Just because it's not the right time doesn't mean it's not the right thing. And the temptation is just to throw it away and say, well, fine. I'm going to take my ball and go home. And kind of a mentality. But
the shelf is so important because it also teaches us to hear people differently. When I was young in ministry, if somebody came up to me and said, Aaron, we should start this ministry. Our youth group could really, value doing something like this, right? And I'm using vague terms, it would be good if our youth group did this. Young Aaron would hear, you suck and you're not doing everything that I think you should be doing, right? That's what young Aaron heard. Old Aaron, with these white hairs down here in this beard. Old Aaron now goes to the shelf and says, dude, I agree. And I have been working on this or been thinking about it. And I pull it off the shelf and I say, hey, take a look at this. Is this kind of what you're talking about? And would you help co-lead this and go through this? I said, I can support you. I can help and kind of move through this kind of a thing. So the shelf is like super important. And I legitimately have a shelf in my office that has ideas.
Yeah, for sure.
I legitimately have that notes app like in your phone with like ministry ideas and notes and stuff like that for occasions just like that. For if somebody, because that's not somebody, and to me now, that's not somebody coming up and being critical, which I really struggled, and I still do. Like it's not something that I just grew out of. I really struggle with like thinking everybody's just being overcritical. You know, I've had some overcritical people in my life, and it's left some scars, and so there's a lot of moments of praying through that. But you know, saying they're not being overcritical. This is God showing me a volunteer or somebody who might be passionate about this idea. Let's run with it.
Yeah, and I like what Stephen was saying about having specific people in mind.
I didn't say
you identify gifts that people have. And so as this ministry is kind of coming into mind, there's somebody specific that comes to mind. And it's even better if it's one of those people that are, you talk about the 20-80 rule, right? You have 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. What I don't want to do is I don't want to burden those people who are already doing a lot of the work with something additional. But there are those people that are kind of on the outside of that circle. They're always present. They always show up, and they always like, hey, can I help you guys with anything? Can I help clean up? Can I help tear down? So they're involved, but kind of on the fringe of involvement. Is there something here that I can use of their skill set that can pull them in? So we begin to increase. Now it's the 22-78 rule, and now it's the 25-75 rule to begin to just expand the footprint of the people that are really working in these ministries. Because the more engaged people are, the more fulfilled their life in the body is going to be. And the more fulfilled that life in the body is going to be, the more outward focus and reaching we're going to be. Just everything ends up so much better. And like you said, just put it on the shelf and waiting. And as soon as someone comes and says, hey, I had an idea, it's like, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. Take this and look at it. Also, man, it resonates with me when you talked about kind of feeling threatened when someone comes in. That's such an insecure way of thinking, because our whole purpose in serving the kingdom is to motivate people.
I know.
To be invested. And then the moment they become invested, we feel a little bit threatened. Because we're a little bit insecure, and it's hard to not allow other experiences to shape that. And one of the things I've really tried to be a lot more open to is embracing that moment when someone steps up to do the job and allows me to take a step back.
Right.
And to realize that moment is not me failing. It's actually, a success of ministry that empowers someone to come and do that work.
Oh, I know.
That's been such a radical mind shift for me. And we talked about it just the other day.
It's not easy to get there.
No, it's not.
It's not easy to get there, and it's an easy place to get away from too.
No, and let me say this: it's not the church that instills this.
No, it's not.
It's not seminary that instills it. It is my American mindset of independence and empowerment, and my own selfish identity.
Right.
Is what gets me there.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
It's my value set that gets me in that place, and that's what I've been working on changing, is understanding where my value, where my purpose, and where my successes come from.
These are some of those things.
Stepping up.
You watch that video from the skit guys. The chisel. And there's plenty of people who are sitting in the audience, and I mean these are these are the inner chisels that we get to, and where he's like, oh, but that's gonna really hurt. Yeah, Because this is what it truly means to be transformed to be more like Christ. And when we are more humble, and when we are more self-sacrificing, and when we always put other people's needs before ourselves, like, it's not easy. And there's a lot of translating, again, that kind of has to happen, where instead of hearing somebody being overcritical, we intend to take some deep breaths, we remember who we serve, and we go, okay, well then, let me meet you where you're at. Maybe have some valid points here. Maybe we can, move with this. And it's not easy. And I say this right now, which means I'm probably going to get an email or a text or something from somebody this week that's going to challenge me and push me through this.
Well, you and I talked about it last week, where it was, hey man, I got this, this list of recommendations, and you made that phone call, and I was like, okay, so do you want the guy that's going to like vent with you and like pile on, or do you want my real answer?
That's right. And I did. I called you and I was like, I need you to talk me off a ledge. And
it all comes down to this very truth, right? It's like, this is what you have put this program in place to do.
Absolutely.
The program is working. And so don't be threatened because the program is working.
That's right.
And so, but man, it's such a challenge. And I think that's why the clarity of your direction, your expectations is so important.
Yeah.
It's important for the people that you're engaging, but it's also important for me, because if I have that clearly defined, it gives me something to look back on and go, oh, yeah, this is what I wanted to happen. I forgot. This is why I put this in place in the first place. This is the need I recognize that's healthy. Now being filled. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just such a, I don't know, vision and direction being clearly set, I think is.
Well, and then holding fast, holding true to that as well. Like when the rough winds come and stuff like that. I don't even know.
Yeah,
we're so off course.
We are and we aren't. I think holding true, and here's where it's hard for me to hold fast as well. At the beginning, like, I have this idea in my mind, right? I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be awesome. And because it's going to be awesome and everybody trusts me, it's going to be so well attended. And I see my people showing up in big ways for other things. Surely they're going to show up big for mine. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's like 4 people that show up that first time. Right? And we've come kind of back around to this a lot of times over the course of our podcast here. It's been what? Man. We're going on 3 years?
14 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, it's so easy to overlook a handful of people that are in front of you for, like, the hundreds that aren't.
Right.
Like, how do I go get those? Well, first, minister to these 4. Minister to these 10. Minister to this 1. God's put him here for a reason. The Spirit of God has led him into this moment for a reason. And don't step over the people right in front of you to minister to people that aren't in front of you. And not being discouraged maybe by kind of a slow start. Sometimes it's those slow starts that give you the information you need to really build something meaningful and powerful.
Right.
And it also gives those few people a little bit of ownership in what's going to go forward, as you're able to have some more conversation with them about how we can continue to expand. So, I say kind of press on, and don't be afraid of that small group, and figure out how you can use that small group to make something bigger and better.
Yeah. Remember the Coles. Remember to translate whatever you're trying to bring and bring it into your. Remember to kind of move slow. I mean, churches move slow, right? Like, churches just move slow, and I feel like we try to move sometimes too slow, but they do move slow, and that's just a fact, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it takes a little bit to get traction, and that's okay. Like, sometimes new programs don't need to happen. Sometimes they do, and I think Josh had said something to me off the podcast a while ago. He said, hey, your program doesn't look the way you want it to look like right now, because you don't have the people involved that that need to be involved. But in about 2 or 3 years, if you keep up to it, it's going to look the way you want it to because you have trained people to act and be the way you want in that kind of a program. And maybe that was with my student leaders or something like that. Like your first set of student leaders are not going to be like super great, and it's going to be chaotic, and you're going to be like, man, we got one thing accomplished. Which, by the way, Josh Jones, if you listen to this podcast, like your class that you taught on student leaders was fantastic because you're like, he said something in there. He said, listen, if you're just now starting this, have your student leaders be the ones who show up 30 minutes early on one Wednesday night or one Sunday night or whatever youth program you're doing or whatever. And you just divide your teens up into groups and have those student leaders pray over them. And if that's all your student leaders do, you just had people show up early to pray over your youth group.
Right.
And I was like, yo, that's how you start a student leadership program. You say, we're going to start a student leadership program. Sure, you can help me plan events, but your responsibility is once a month you're going to show up 30 minutes early and we're going to pray over your set group of people, in the youth group. And I was like, that's like the first step. I feel like a lot of times when I go to these classes and stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, and our student leadership, they lead devotionals and they plan our entire mission trip to Honduras and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, how do you get there though? How do you get there? And so that was like a mind blowing thing for me, was for him to be able to say that and do that. And he said that translates into your adult leaders too. He said just have. This was a different class, but the guy said, listen, you got somebody who you don't know how to use them. He said just tell them, hey, I want you to show up there 10 minutes before class. I want you to hold the door open for the teenagers, and I want you to smile, and I want you to say hi and greet them. And I want you to slowly start learning their names and start greeting them by names and give them high fives as they walk in.
And each one needs to have a different high five, right?
Everyone, yeah. Do that. Hug, high five, or acknowledgement. No. And I was like, man, those are some great starting places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Snoring over there. So think about that. Think about like when you come back, if you're a member and you went and visited a church and you're like, whoa, they do this program. We always have to think about origin stories. How did they start? I always think of like in Southwest in Tigard, Oregon, when I was an intern there. They had this thing called the breakfast, and while I was there, it was in full spin, and so they had like 350 teenagers who were coming into the church to eat breakfast on that morning. And Jeff was like, it didn't always start this way. He said it started with like 4 or 5 kids who would show up, and we'd have a little Bible study, and I'd feed them breakfast here at the church because we had a kitchen, because they had extra time before school. There was like a weird 45-minute gap from when the buses dropped them off and when school started, where kids would just wait around. And I was like, that's how it started. It started with just 2 or 3, that small group, and then it grew into something big, something beautiful, something powerful. Ended up feeding, a ton of people who, honestly, that could have been their only hot meal for the week, kind of a thing. But we have to translate that and bring that in. Into our circle. So
yeah, and origins, keeping in mind kind of where those things began is so important. I remember Dustin loved baseball. I coached him in t-ball. They grew up and they went into machine pitch, and they were 9 and 10 years old. They were live arm pitching, pretty good little baseball team. And that's when Dylan started playing t-ball at 4 or 5, and they're like, hey, you want to coach Dylan's team? I was like, yeah, I'll coach Dylan's team. And so here I'm going from, a 9 and 10-year-old back to 4 and 5-year-old. And it kind of hit one of the kids a grounder, and he did something. And I said, hey, buddy, stay down on the ball. And he kind of looked at me like I had just spoken something foreign. That's a pretty basic fundamental. But I hadn't realized how much I had even had to teach, Dustin's team at the very beginning. And going back to those basics was really hard. So it's like, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a baseball. and this is how you hold a baseball.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, we got to go back to the beginning.
Bowling a baseball at kids and letting them drop to their knees or something. You know, where you don't even hit it with a bat, and it's not even going that fast. But because you've got to start somewhere, and you forget to go back to that step.
And then you build on those little basics. You teach the fundamentals, and it's not going to be good. I don't want to say it's not going to be good. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be as you design in the beginning. But these starting points along the way, you're teaching these fundamental things that all you're going to do is build on in the future.
Right.
And sometimes it's something as simple as just having somebody show up. Like you said, if all else fails, you've got people showing up once a month, 30 minutes early to pray over your teens.
Yeah.
And who can call it a
bummer?
failure?
What a failure. Like, I don't know. That seems like a pretty major landmark for me.
And I feel like I can really build on that, right? I feel like I can build on that.
Oh, man.
And so,
there's a sermon there, right?
There is, absolutely. Taking the victories, taking those little things that are done right. The overall picture is not going to look great in the moment. But the long-term goal is being accomplished. The other one is, you see those artists that they're throwing this stuff on paper, and it's like, looks terrible.
I was just thinking about that.
And then it's just like a couple of strokes of a brush or a knife or something, and it's like, wow.
There's that one guy who paints upside down.
Oh, right.
And then at the end of the sermon, he'll flip it, and you're like, what?
Yeah. So it's really cool, and it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of resolve. It takes a lot of persistence. So trust your vision. Trust your prayer, okay? Pray over it.
Yeah.
Pray over it. Pray over it. And then, trust the fact that you've prayed over it and God hasn't taken it away from you. And then just be persistent and don't be so quick to give up. Find the little wins and continue to build.
Yeah. Amen.
What's your behind the beards moment today, man?
My behind the beard, my behind the beard moment is, you don't cook a good marshmallow in the flames. You cook it over the coals. And there's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of, we did a building project at Central, and they came in and did one of those personality tests. And I thought it was a really dumb version of the way they did it, but it was kind of interesting because they divided people up as elements, so you're like a wind fire or a water fire and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And there are some people who are
for a Conservative Church of Christ,
right? There are some people who are like fires, and it's like you get so burnt on an idea, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna do it, and you come in like a raging flame. But what happens when you have a raging flame? Well, it burns up all the fuel, and then it dies out really fast.
Yeah.
And so those fires, like you want to use them to really kick off and start your program, but then you got to have winds that come in and kind of keep the flame going. So anyway, there's like a whole bunch of metaphoric crap on there or whatever. Yeah. But that's what it makes me think of is sometimes I can come back from a conference or I can go visit my kids' church, right? I don't have kids that go to a different church, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I go visit some mega church that my kids are attending, and I come back with the passion because they're like, oh, they do this college ministry, and we need to do this here. And I come in with a big flame, but there's no groundwork. There's no origin story happening at our church. And I get frustrated and I get mad, and I'm like, well, we never do anything new. And it's like, dude, it's because you don't roast a marshmallow over the fire. You do it over the coals. So you got to get that origin story. You got to get that base going. It's got to cook for a little bit in order for it to be implicated, and things like that. So,
and the truth is, everybody loves an origin story, right?
Everyone loves an origin story.
I mean,
everyone.
It doesn't matter
except for an American Ninja Warrior. Like, just give me the people failing. I don't need everyone's origin story.
That's right.
I always make that joke. That's the number one reason Lauren and I stopped watching that show is because everybody had an origin story. And I'm like, dude, I just want to watch people fall. Like, is there anywhere I can just watch the live feed of people doing this?
That's right.
We do want to remind you of something that's important to Josh and I, and that's Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Do not grow weary in doing good. Man, this world is messy. This life is messy. So do something different. Do something good in Jesus' name. Don't do it for yourself.
No.
Do it because Jesus loves you. one of the most powerful children's songs ever to be taught to our children is that Jesus loves you. It's a hard hitter. So do that. Do something good in his name. Don't grow weary, man. This world is messy, and it needs more Jesus to clean it up. I'm Aaron, and that's Josh, and we will see you next week on Behind the Beards.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.